welcome to Learn to Live Stress-Free. This is Christine Wright with Dr. Robert Wright Jr., your go-to wellness coaches of www.stressfreenow.info. Our featured guest today is Dr. Judith Glick-Smith, speaking on getting your message out to the world. Judy has been a systems and technical communication professional, instructional designer, and organizational development consultant since 1983. She is president and CEO of Mentor Factor Incorporated, which focuses on teaching individuals and organizations the art of flow-based decision-making through the design and implementation of user-centered systems that facilitate productivity, efficiency, and innovation. Recent clients are the University of Pennsylvania, Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Administration, NEC, Health Teacher, Deloitte, and the Social Security Administration. She is a graduate of the Transformative Studies doctoral program with a concentration in integral studies from the California Institute of Integral Studies. Judy has a Master's of Science in Conflict Management from Kennesaw State University and a Bachelor's in Accounting with a minor in Information Systems from Georgia State University. She is certified in the Zachman Framework for Enterprise Architecture. She also holds a certification in EQI, an emotional intelligence assessment tool. Judy is a fellow and past international president of the Society for Technical Communication. She has published in numerous peer-reviewed journals and has regularly presented at professional organizations and conferences since 1988. She is currently working on a book on flow-based decision-making. We're happy to have Judith here again today. As you know, she's a featured luminary on our site, and she brings a wealth of information to our show. Judy, welcome.
Thank you. Well, it's good to be with you all again.
Yes, Judy. I'm so glad that you could join us again today. Welcome.
Thank you.
Judy, you have a new book coming out. Can you tell our audience the title of your book and a little bit about what you will be writing about?
The title. It continues to morph. At the moment, the working title is Lessons from the Fireground, Facilitating a Flow-Based Work Environment. I have changed the title many times, and I struggle with that part of it. But basically, the book is a primer for how to facilitate flow in organizations. Mahai Csikszentmihalyi wrote a book called Good Business, which talks about how businesses need to do it. But he didn't really get into the how they should do it. And so I'm hoping that my book is going to be kind of a supplement to what he's already given me a basis for. So I'm using my doctoral research in critical decision making in the fire service along with my current research with the Georgia smoke divers to create a model of how organizations can facilitate flow for their employees.
You know, I certainly understand about choosing a title. Many people, that's where work starts. Once you get your title, you can go, and I can certainly see it changing.
And being a technical writer for so long, I tend not to be very fluffy. So I assume that, you know, when it comes time to actually publish the thing for real, somebody will come up with will look at it, who is in marketing or whatever, and say, oh, this is what this needs to be called, so it will grab people's attention. So I'm not too worried about that at this point.
That makes sense. I'm glad you have that base covered. So I'm sure you know from having done your doctoral work and all you've done throughout your career, teaching and training, being able to successfully finish writing a book and getting it published is a major accomplishment. Can you share some of the challenges that you faced in writing and what solutions you've worked out in being able to manage your time and your responsibilities and your creativity?
Well, this is a great question. I've been a technical writer for over 30 years and have written many, many books in the information technology space. This writing is quite different and particularly because it has to do with, because it's my heart, I should say. When I write technical documentation, I don't have an emotional attachment to it. So this has an emotional attachment. But I didn't want to take my dissertation and respin it. It's way too academic for the audience that I want to reach. I've been able to develop a skeleton, that is, identify the chapters and the structure. I've written 6 out of 9 chapters, but about a year ago, I sent the first 2 chapters to one of my firefighters to read, and his feedback told me that I needed to rewrite the stories, all my firefighter stories, and he was right. I had taken out all of the details when I wrote my dissertation, because when you write a dissertation, you only include what's pertinent to what you're trying to convey. So he took one of the stories and he rewrote it, even though he didn't know the details. And he just made them up, and he was right on the money, and I realized I needed to go back and rewrite all the stories. And the effect of that put me into a funk, which took me quite a while to recover from. I'm not a creative writer, so I was afraid I would not be true to the firefighter who told me the story. So I'm working my way through those feelings, and I've begun to rework the stories, to rewrite them. I have all the details because I have the interviews with these people, so I know what the details are, but I wanted to rewrite them in a way that worked and still is true to what they told me, but works in the context of what I'm talking about in the book. Finding time to write is another challenge because I'm an independent consultant and I am my sole source of income. I have to work when the work is here. So I've found that if I set time aside to write every day, I will write. That's how I got my dissertation finished. I just spent the first 2 hours of every morning writing. I know that writing in the morning is my best time mentally, and I also have found that if I don't get to write in the morning, I probably won't write during the day. So I call the morning my blessed time for writing.
You just sound like you wrote another book, Judy. I mean, I know working with clients and my own experience in doing my master's thesis and, you know, observing Bob and doing his dissertation, having that sacred, blessed time to write is really important. You know, one of the things that Bob and I sometimes butt heads on is that I tend to tell a story very literally. He'll tell a story in a much more engaging way, but I'm saying, Bob, that's not what happened, and you know, that sort of creative way of embellishing, of getting meanings across without, you know, foot and then the right foot and then the left foot, it's a little bit dry. So when they say, oh, he, you know, glided across the room, he floated in air, and no, he didn't float. So
I know. That's exactly what I struggle with. And I'm so afraid I'm going to put a detail in that wasn't true, you know, that to what that firefighter told me. So that is exactly what I struggle with. So
well, I can relate. It sounds wonderful. And, you know, when I work with writers, because it is such a personal, heartfelt, heart-based process that sometimes the least bit of interruption can really just break your flow and stop you in your tracks. So
it can. Absolutely.
Yeah, this is a dedicated marathon. Now, many new as well as experienced authors are now going the self-publishing route. Will your book follow the traditional model, or will it be self-published?
I have looked into both. I've spoken with a couple of agents. I've actually submitted my proposal, but so far I haven't found the right fit. Agents are there's so many people out there writing books, and they tend to be very specialized. And if you don't hit the right niche for that particular agent, it just doesn't, they won't take you. I'd like to go the traditional route, and primarily because they have the resources. They have more resources than I do for promotion. But if I can't find anybody, I'm not adverse to doing the self-publishing thing. So I haven't really decided at this point.
Sounds that you're taking a really good practical approach to your critical decision-making here. So excellent. Thank you, Judy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Judy, listening to you, I was wondering a few things. One, since you have so much experience as a public speaker and have delivered keynotes, and as you would be well aware that many people have a fear of speaking in public or in front of a crowd or even a small audience, I was wondering if you, since you have that down, could you just briefly talk about whether or not you see something that I see in terms of the similarity? I believe that the fear of public speaking that many people may have is quite similar in large measure to the fear of a person seeing their writing either before it's finished or after it's finished, because at the end of the day, what we're really talking about is a fear of embarrassment and humiliation. And although it would seem like the speaking and the writing are totally different, my view is that the fears, the emotions that are generated by the fear might be actually the same depending on the person or quite similar. So I was wondering your take on that.
Well, let me break it down a little bit. First, I'll talk about writing, the fear of writing. I think most people get stuck on where to begin when they're talking about writing. The task seems overwhelming. Fortunately, since I've coordinated and written very large documents, that part doesn't bother me at all. People are so fearful of being judged, which is what you were referring to. It's hard to let others see what we've poured our hearts and souls into. Letting those 2 chapters out, I agonized over doing that, but then I thought I have to. What we don't realize is when most people want us to succeed, and if we can trust in that assumption, we seek out people we can trust, then we don't take the criticism personally, because the more eyes that see the work or hear the speech and give you feedback on it, the better the work is going to be. I've never been, in terms of speaking, I have never been afraid of speaking in front of people. That has never bothered me. But I know people that are just so incredibly fearful of getting up in front of people. My daughter is one, and she has to do it because she's a meeting planner, and she does not like speaking in front of people. But I think the secret is to talk about things you're comfortable talking about. For example, I have a list of topics that I speak on, and I rarely deviate from that list. I have in the past sometimes gone and done something that's tangential to what one of those topics would be. But pretty much I stay within my own topic space. I research my audience. The audience in both speaking and writing is absolutely key to what you're going to talk about. And then you gear the message directly to them. In terms of speaking, my process goes like this. I write the speech out first. I write as I think about it. But I don't use the written copy to speak from. I usually speak. I might have a PowerPoint that guides me through it, or I will or if I don't use a PowerPoint, I can speak without a PowerPoint too. I might have a bulleted list or whatever to guide me through, but pretty much I speak without anything other than that guidance. I know the speech. I learned it so well that I can adjust it based on what happens with the audience. And the way I do that is I practice. I practice and I practice and I practice with the timer. That way you're sure that you don't go over. If somebody gives you an hour to speak, then you time it for an hour, and I pretty much can come in exactly as people have specified. So that they're similar in terms of fear, but it goes back to what I talked about in the previous podcast: experience and training. So if you make an effort to get the experience, even if you're terrified, there are tons of places that need speakers, places like Rotary, or you can go do a 10-minute speech at a Rotary Club, and Lions Club, all these local clubs in various in all the little towns in the country. Well, they need speakers, and you don't do it for money. You do it to get practice. And to get training, go find a Toastmaster organization. There's Toastmasters organizations everywhere. And you go every week, and there you get to speak in front of people who will give you feedback, constructive criticism. The content of what you talk about is not judged. You are given constructive feedback on how to carry yourself, how to move across the stage, how to address the audience, how to tell stories, and the various different types of speeches that you might have to give in your life. I have seen people start out at Toastmasters and their knees are knocking at the beginning when they first give their first speech. They're so terrified you just ache for them. But within 6 months, they're comfortable. They can get up in front and they can give a solid, rock-solid speech. So I'm real sold on the ability, on the value of Toastmasters or any organization that will help you learn how to speak.
Well, Judy, I want to thank you for that level of clarity that you delivered to our audience, that it actually, the base fear is the fear of being judged, and that would apply whether or not the person is writing or speaking in front of a group. It's actually that fear of criticism, whether it's deserved or not. That, my wife Christine uses the metaphor all the time. It's like when you see someone that mistreats a dog, where they've rolled up the newspaper and they hit the dog on the soft part of their nose, and that would be the most painful place to hit a dog.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everybody's familiar, unfortunately, with seeing a dog where that's fearful. The tail is drooped between the legs, et cetera. And so the same thing happens with people. As you said, imagine a group of people in a meeting, and then we say, well, Philip, I'd like you to say a few words, and the person is totally caught off guard. They weren't told they were going to speak. They don't have any material prepared. And so, it could be that it could be a friendly kind of thing, or it could be an unfriendly thing where they ask the person to speak knowing they wouldn't be prepared. Likewise, I think it's so interesting. Howard Becker wrote a book about the issues of people having a fear of seeing their writing seen before it's ready. I know I dealt with that. Part of the issue, at least for me, was that the way that I write is very different than many people. I don't start with an outline. I start with what I found with Judy was that once I get the title, it's like the piece is written. So especially an article for me, that once I get the title clear and I go, aha, it's like an aha moment for me. And then all the pieces start to fall in place. And in fact, my wife Christine, sometimes she laughs, I'll have something 85-90% written, and I said, now I'll do the outline. And the reason I'm doing the outline is so I can do the table of contents.
Table of contents, yeah.
Right, because I need the table of contents. It has to make sense. The thing is written in different places. I write on napkins or back of the newspaper, but that process kind of works for me because what I found was that I get an idea at any time. I can be driving the car, I could be taking out the garbage, I could be walking to the mailbox, But the key, what I found, is that I have to write it down right then, because like a dream, like when you wake up, if you don't write it down, it kind of evaporates. And I go, what was I thinking? And so I just usually grab whatever I have close. I grab a napkin. If I'm reading the newspaper, I write it on the newspaper. So I think, going forward, it does make more sense for me to have a more systematized thing where I'm keeping it in a little notebook. And I've gotten a little better with that. But in my mind...
if whatever... I'm a proponent of whatever works for you. I wouldn't put a box around it. That's the way I work, and most technical writers, we're probably more left-brained than right-brained in terms of, needing that structure.
Right.
But I think what we try to do so much is to put boxes around people. We're supposed to do it a certain way, and of course, school does that to us. We're in elementary school, high school. We had to do the outline before we write the paper, right? But not everybody thinks that way. If you're more visual, you may a way to do it, and one way you might do it, and it'll end up being your table of contents, is when you get ready to write something, get a big old piece of white paper with a bunch of magic markers that are different colors, and just do a mind map of what you want to throw in there. And that way your book or your document, whatever it is you're writing, will fall out of that. You draw a picture of what you want to do. So that's another way to do it, and it's perfectly legitimate. All the little sheets of paper that you've collected from when you were in the car or in the bathroom or whatever, you just glue them on that piece of paper, and then all of a sudden you've got a picture of how this document's going to fall out.
Well, Judy, I think you know me well enough that the issue of boxes that that doesn't even apply to me in the least, because I go, what box, what bag? So the two reasons to have more structure for a person like myself would be, the first reason is that all those scraps of paper, whether it's a newspaper or a napkin, on a gusty day, I open the car door and they fly outside. That has actually happened to one of my aunts said to me. She goes, Bob, I think it's time for you to get an address book, because I had an old address book, and the door opened and literally like 7 pages, flew out of the car, and there I was running down the street, picking up, and I actually have done that, and I've gotten much, much better. The other issue, Judy, I would imagine I might not be the only person that has this issue. By writing on a napkin or something else and writing it fast, sometimes when I go back to it, I cannot read my own handwriting. I can't read what I wrote. I go, and then, I have the napkin and I'm turning in different directions. I got the news. I was like, what does this say here? And then, it's written on top of paper with newsprint. So I'm holding it up to the light and I'm trying to figure out my own handwriting, because sometimes, so here's the really funny part. Sometimes when I'm writing things, it's not in a well-lit environment, so I'm writing, it's kind of dark. So, and I was like, I'm kind of feeling my writing, and so it all works out. But I want to.
Well, let me tell you a quick little story about my granddaughter, who is a poet, and she writes on scraps of paper and leaves them all over the place, and she writes these little verses. And one day, I think she's about 11. She's 17 now. She still writes poetry. But one day, she left this little sheet of paper at my house. I'll read it to you. I have it up on my door because I love it. The breeze blows me away across the sea to another day. And I called her up and I said, do you need that for something you're writing? And she said, oh, no. She said, I don't need it. I'll just pull it down again. And I said, what do you mean? And she said that it's always out floating around her, and she can pull it down again, which I thought was a really interesting way to refer to her writing, that it isn't really hers. It came to her, she captured it, and she can capture it at any time. So that's another way maybe you need to trust that you can pull it down again when you can't read your own writing.
Well, Judy, I'm listening to you. I'm part of
that is such a lovely story about your granddaughter.
Yeah.
That's a lot of trust to know that she'll pull it down again.
Yeah, I think in my case, I'm actually familiar with what you're talking about. Sometimes for me, the process is like a automatic type writing where I get the clarity on the title, and then it's like whole paragraphs just come to me, and I just start writing. I had asked David Pete about this, and he said, "Oh yeah, that's automatic writing." He says, "When I have a writing deadline, I just go into a corner and I just write." And he said it just flows. So what the reason I mentioned that in the context of the poetry writing of your granddaughter, I do remember when I used to write poetry and how it used to come. It was almost like it wasn't even my writing, but I haven't written poems like that in many, many years. But the other thing is that sometimes now, Judy, I will go back and look at something that I've written, and it will actually startle me, and I go, "Oh wow, did I write that?" And I said, "I don't know if I can write that again." I don't know if many people probably had that experience. They wrote something, wrote an article or a book, and they go back and you look at page 207, and I go, "Oh wow, I don't know if I could do that again." You know what I'm saying? It's almost like playing basketball and shooting and hitting a 3-point shot from the corner. I go, "Oh, I know I couldn't do that now because I was throwing bricks the last time I played basketball." So sometimes I just feel fortunate. I got, like Oprah Winfrey uses the phrase that when she was speaking at August Wilson's funeral, she said, "At least he got his music out." And I always remembered that. That's part of, I see the wordsmith aspect, that it is as if it's a form of that kind of communication is musical when you're in the flow. When it's flowing, it's almost like you said, like your granddaughter's thing. It's flowing, whether it's poetry, when, something is written right, it actually feels like music.
Mm-hmm.
So, Judy, one last question here, that to go back to our last podcast, you were talking about flow, and one of the things that I wanted to ask you more specifically about is what, in your experience, are some of the triggers for flow, because since it's such a desirable state where our audience may want to know what are the things that they could do to enter flow states because it's so enjoyable.
Well, it goes to the you have to remember everybody's flow state is different. So what puts you in flow is going to be different than my flow state is going to be doing a different task than what your flow state is. So what the trigger will be different. So what you have to do is pay attention to when you are in a flow state and ask yourself, what was it that put me here? Was it the fact that it's, you're playing the piano and all of a sudden you find yourself just, everything's just wonderful and the time just passes by without you even knowing it and that kind of thing. Was the trigger just sitting down at the piano, or was it that you found a particular song or a particular difficulty of song? One of the things that is part of being in a flow state, we go into flow when the task is challenging, but that our training and our experience are at a level that we can still do the work, but it's still challenging to us. So if we pick up in the piano example, if we pick up if we decide to play a piece that is way beyond what we're able to, that's not going to put us in a flow state. However, if we find something that's a little bit more than what we're used to playing, but you can do it. You can sight read it, and that might be what the trigger is. For example, of the 16 firefighters that I spoke with, for my dissertation or for my doctoral work. I only have one who consciously entered a flow state, and she told me that what her words were, "I hit the kill switch." They rolled up on scene, and there was a woman in the driveway screaming, which is generally a trigger for them. That means there's probably a child in a burning building if there's a woman in the driveway screaming. I collected 49 stories. 14 of them were about children. So they'll automatically go into a flow state at that point. But this woman rolled up on scene and she said, "I hit the kill switch." And that was her way of putting herself into a flow state. That meant everything else around her fell away so that she could focus on the task at hand. And even though she was hyper aware of what was going on around her, the things that weren't important, she was able to push out of her consciousness. So to figure out what is the trigger for you, you have to pay attention to when you are in a flow state, what put you there. That was a long answer to that question. I don't know if I answered.
Well, Judy, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for that level of clarity, and thank you for being our guest today.
Sure.
Judy, would you tell our listeners about your services and how they can work with you?
My little company provides a full range of transformative communication services, including IT consulting, mentoring and coaching, technical communication, and public speaking. My contact information is, my email is judy@mentorfactorinc.com. My phone number is 770-633-5582. And my website, where you can get more information about what we do, is www.mentorfactorinc.com.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Judy. So again, listeners, you can contact Judy and learn more about her on her website, www.mentorfactorinc.com. That's mentorfactorinc.com. And her telephone number is 770-633-5582. And it's a beautifully designed new website. And Judy's email is judy@mentorfactorinc.com. Judy, we want to thank you so much for being a guest on our show again. As always, it's a delight, and you bring a wealth of experience and information to Bob and me and our audience. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, Judy. I tell you, I have enjoyed this time we've spent with you, especially the clarity you have brought in terms of clearly identifying that it's the fear of being judged that underlies people being afraid to get up in front of a group or to have their work seen, that crit. And especially, I would imagine today, in the context on the Internet, that everyone's pretty much familiar with the term troll, that, as a friend said to me, he said, well, Bob, if you're going to be dealing with the public and publishing books, you have to toughen up your skin. So in terms of being judged. And so some of it, Judy, it's that fear of when it's undeserved, especially if a person's done a good job or whatever, that it's, I think part of the fear is that no matter what the person does, that they're gonna get the hatchet or it's going to be negative. So I want to thank you for that. So Judy, what final thoughts or key idea would you like our audience to take away from today's broadcast?
Well, writing and speaking, even though we might be afraid to put it out there, that's how we put our work into the world. It's what your contribution is. Now, it isn't for everybody. I mean, some people just don't want to do that. But and if you are like me, I have a lot of ideas, and thoughts about things and opinions, and I'm not afraid to talk about them. It's my contribution to whatever the body of knowledge is. And really, I feel like if you have an inclination to do it, you really have a responsibility to do it, because as we build a body of knowledge, we are creating the future. So if you want to be effective at this, you need to get yourself trained if you're not already. If you aren't a good writer, consider collaboration. You could get an editor or even a ghostwriter, or you might want to find somebody who will share the writing with you. If you want to write, you have to write. If you want to speak, you need to get out and speak. So you seek out the opportunities to get in front of people. It doesn't matter where you speak or that you are doing it for free. It's the experience that's going to make you better. If the organization to which you are speaking doesn't have a feedback form, bring your own. Take the comments and criticisms to heart and make your next speech even better.
I want to thank you for being our featured guest today, and I want to thank our audience so much for listening, wherever you are, in whatever time zone you are in. We welcome and look forward to your comments about our show. Please contact us through our website with your feedback and suggestions. Remember, listeners, if you'd like to experience the same benefits our coaching clients get with us and learn how to get control of your schedule or easy ways to dissolve your chronic pain, stress, or anxiety, feel free to call us at 954-900-2179. Mention that you heard our Stress Free Now podcast show, and your first session is absolutely free. Call today to schedule your appointment. For Christine Wright, this is Dr. Robert Wright, Jr. of www.stressfreenow.info. Until next time, be safe and be well.